Tonight, we have new details in the murder case of those 4 University of Idaho students. This is the spring semester got underway today ahead of suspect Bryan Kohberger's expected court appearance tomorrow. For the first time, we are hearing from one of Kohlberger's neighbors. CBS's Lilia Luciano reports from Moscow.
Tonight, in an exclusive interview, a neighbor in the Pullman, Washington apartment building of suspect Bryan Kohberger says Kohlberger spoke to him about the murders. The neighbor asked not to be identified.
He brought it up in conversation, asked if I had heard about the murders, and which I did, and then he said, yeah, it seems like they have no leads. It seems like it was a crime of passion. At the time of our conversation, it was only a few days after it had happened, so there wasn't much details out.
Also tonight, the search warrant for Kohlberger's Washington apartment has been sealed temporarily. A judge saying the details could, quote, prematurely end the investigation and create a threat to public safety. Meanwhile, just 6 miles away at the University of Idaho, students are returning to class today for the first time since Kohlberger's arrest. Many, like freshman Madeline Pollock, expressing relief.
I was kind of glad to see a lot of cops around, just in case something did happen, they'll be there. But it feels very relieving and knowing he's behind bars.
Kohlberger is charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of students Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Zena Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin on November 13th. And he's due in court tomorrow. Kohlberger isn't expected to enter a plea yet. Tomorrow morning's status hearing will focus on scheduling his next court appearance when we hope to learn much more about the case prosecutors are building against him. Nora.
Lilia Luciano with that new interview. Thank you.
Well, it seems we have an update on the case of the Bryan Kohberger, Idaho murders. And it seems past week, quite a bit of revelations have come up. And so I'd like to share them with you. One in which is now that there are witnesses coming forward talking about Bryan Kohberger's previous years to the murder. And we're getting almost like a background shape of his psychology as he was growing up in his late teenage, early 20s. And what I'm going to share with everybody else has that I've seen regarding his internet posts from Tapatalk back in 2011. I'm actually going to share that with you on a screen that I found scouring the internet. Also, as for a updated hearing, well, he's had a status hearing this week, really, and the status hearing was just basically a hearing about where he waived his right to trial, and that his public defender Ann Taylor, requested next court date be pushed back until June of next year. So the prosecution, of course, this will give them plenty of time to give an overwhelming amount of evidence if they have it. More evidence as to what they have. So the hearing actually it was only about 6 minutes. So here. All right.
Right, good morning. We are on the record. 29222805. This is State of Idaho versus Bryan Kohberger. Mr. Kohlberger is in custody. He is appearing here in court with his attorneys, Ms. Taylor, Mr. Logsdon, Mr. Thompson, Ms. Jennings appearing on behalf of the state. This is the time set in the matter for the preliminary hearing status conference. So I am going to inquire of counsel. Ms. Taylor, what's the status at this time?
Thank you, Your Honor. We are going to ask the court to set preliminary hearing out into June. we would request the 3rd or 4th week of June, and probably 4 or 5 days for preliminary hearing. Mr. Kohlberger understands his right to a timely preliminary hearing, and he's willing to waive the timeliness to allow us time to obtain discovery in this case and be prepared.
And Mr. Thompson, are you in agreement with that?
The state has no objection to that, Your Honor. Ms. Taylor reached out to us by email yesterday with her proposal. On reflection, the state's calendar would be better in the month of July, but we will make the end of June work if that's the board's preference. And I haven't had a chance to talk with Ms. Taylor about that. I'm sorry, I know that's last minute.
That's okay. The court's calendar is going to be better towards the end of June, early July. So would that work, Ms. Taylor, for your scheduling on your other matters?
Your Honor, yes, if we take that 4th week in June, that's actually best.
Okay. So, Mr. Kohlberger, I need to speak to you for a moment then. Sir, you do understand, and Ms. Taylor has represented here, that she's advised you of your right to have, or fully discussed with you, the right that you have, which is to have your preliminary hearing within 14 days of the date that you initially appeared before this court. As you recall, when I advised you of your rights, that hearing is a probable cause hearing where the state has to establish that more likely than not, these felony offenses were committed and you were the one that committed the felony offenses. If you waive your right to a speedy preliminary hearing, it does not mean that you're giving up your right to have a preliminary hearing. It simply means that you would not be able to come back and challenge that the state did not present probable cause within 14 days. Do you understand?
Yes.
Have you had enough time to speak with Ms. Taylor about your decision to waive your right to a speedy preliminary hearing?
Yes.
Do you need any additional time to do so?
No.
Then I will ask at this time, as to the 5 counts, felony counts that were charged in the criminal complaint that was filed on December 29th of 2022, are you waiving your right to a speedy preliminary hearing and agreeing that that hearing can be held outside the 14-day period?
Yes.
And Ms. Taylor, do you concur with his waiver?
I do, Your Honor. Thank you.
I will find your waiver of speedy preliminary hearing is knowing, intelligently, voluntarily entered here in open court with the assistance of counsel. We will go ahead and set the matter for preliminary hearing. Beginning Monday, June 26th at 9:00 a.m. And I will go ahead and reserve the week, so June 26th to June 30th, in the event that we need all 5 days for presentation of evidence. And just so council knows, it will begin at 9 a.m. each of those days. Is there anything further to address at this time in the case, Mr. Thompson?
Not from the state's perspective, Your Honor, no.
All right. Or Ms. Taylor?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Kohlberger, then you will be remanded into custody on your same no bail at this point in time, pending further proceedings. Again, we'll send notice out to council, and we will be in recess for this morning.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And as you do, where the neighbor was interviewed, And he basically said that Kohlberger was basically fishing for information about what he thought about the murders and whatnot. But what led? What was the driving factor? Well, just over the past week, I think from my own perspective, there's a lot of variables at play. It's really a little bit all about what actually drove him. He actually hasn't pled guilty or hasn't pled innocent yet. He's yet to plead anything to the case. And I think that they're going to wait for it. Now, according to dated January 15th, criminologist Kathy Canning-Mello raised a lot of questions last Saturday about posts by Bryan Kohberger, posts I'm going to be sharing with you on the screen. Now, when she was on, asked her about her thoughts about these Kohlberger's mental health condition, citing his previous posts online from Tapatalk. And some of these posts, Kohlberger was a teenager, where he felt disconnected from society and spoke about various mental health challenges, including anxiety, depression, and the constant thought of suicide. He talked about this condition, which is called virtual snow, static snow. And virtual snow is the condition person that is characterized by this very small or and it's all simultaneously, so it's small bilateral synchronized dots or lines, which usually throughout the visual field make it partial visual. It's hard to explain if you never had it. I never had it, but I know people that do have it. It's almost like having tinnitus, which is a constant sound, which I have, which is a constant ringing 24/7. You can't get rid of it. You can only get used to it. But with visual snow, VS in short, it's always present, and it's in all conditions of illumination, and it happens even when your eyes are closed. And so he was experiencing. Kohlberger was actually experiencing this at a very young age, and so on the website Tapatalk, he talked about this. In fact, now, in his very early years, so it's disturbing, but said more information needs to be revealed to understand the specifics of this condition. And she actually, I'll use the quote she used on an interview by Jim Costa, quote, "We're going to have to, I think, more deep interviews of people who know Bryan well in order to understand the condition that he had and any impact it might have had on his behavior at this time later in life. And if that condition still exists, we don't know that. So I think it's going to be incumbent upon prosecutions, investigations, and right now that we have a few more months to do this, to conduct these long behaviorally oriented interviews," end quote. And I believe it was CNN or MSNBC where they interviewed one of Kohlberger's friends, and he said that Kohlberger constantly talked about his fuzzy vision, even back in 2009. What I want to do is show you, been shown before on viral media, but I want to show it to you anyway. You can see this is Tapatalk, and the platform is original viral snow or static form, and it's this board is for those who perceive visual snow or television like static in their visual field. Now, the post thread is called "Am I the Only One?" And as you can see right here, and I'm going to blow it up just a little bit. You can see right here, this is XR, those with visual snow. This is Bryan Kohberger. He joined on November 1st, 2009, active February 20, 2012. This is years before he graduated to sales as a criminal criminal psychology. And as you can see, look what he wrote here. I always feel as if I'm not there, completely depersonalized. Mentally, I experience fog, lack of comprehension at some times, feels like my life is a movie, depersonalization, depression, no interest in activity, constant thought of suicide, crazy thoughts, delusions of grandeur, anxiety, poor self-image, poor social skills, no emotion. I feel like nothing has a point to it. When I get home, I mean to my family. This started when visual snow did. I feel no emotion along with the depersonalization. I can say and do whatever I want with little remorse. Everyone hates me. Pretty much, I am an asshole. He wrote this May 12th, 2011. So as you can see right here, is sociopath. And it's a shame. I don't know, being a clinical psychologist at this time, which would have been a key factor, probably at, getting him the help he needed. But as you can see, he's going to Tapatalk for this to see if other people feel this way. And yes, I mean, you're going to get people, saying, oh, you're most definitely not the only one. And you'll get, he's got quite a bit of responses here from different people, and they experience similar things to him. And as you can see, he wrote, thanks a lot, guys. This helped me a lot. I was not sure if it was normal to have depersonalization to my extent, but it is. I will not pursue happiness and do what makes, I will not pursue happiness and do what makes me happy. But yeah, as you can see, other people are telling me he's not alone and other things. Now, this is not the only thing he wrote. There was another post that he wrote, which was much longer. And I think with this one, I just want to shorten the window and put myself up here. And so if that didn't work, I just want to make sure, because I want you to read it along with me. And this is July 6, 2011. This is exactly 2.5 months from that post. And as you can see, can you relate? And he wrote this in the original visual snow static form. I've had this horrible depersonalization go on in my life for almost 2 years. I often find myself making simple human interactions, but it is as if I am playing a role-playing game such as Oblivion. I can see what is going on. I'm slightly into it, but I can pause the game and focus on my real life. In this case, my life is the game, and my old self can be reached by pausing the game. But how? I often think of things that humans do, things I have done my whole life. I feel like an organic sack of meat with no self-worth, as I am starting to view everyone as this. Everything I have done makes no sense. How did things get this way? How am I wearing this shirt? And who decided that humans shall wear shirts like this? Are we all just advanced animals with possessions? Or is there more than I can't see? I can't connect. I view everything as I would if I was playing Oblivion, pointless and full of nothing out of reality. I am moving out of my house. My last holidays were already lived, but where was I? As my family group hugs and celebrates, I am stuck in this void of nothing, feeling completely no emotion, feeling nothing. I feel dirty, like there is dirt inside my head, inside my mind. I'm always dizzy and confused. I feel no self-worth. I am intelligent, but I feel the opposite. So it's a long post. I'm not going to read all that, but as you can see, he is really spiraling into this. self-depreciation, and a multitude of psychotic disorders, even though one psychologist, he went on CNN and said he suffers no psychological disorder. I would disagree. And he's, and I'm not the expert, but as you can have, he suffered from manic depression, antisocial personality disorder, and that's the extent I'll go as to what is obvious. And I think that's enough right there. I mean, to be a man, well, I think he was 17 when he wrote this, that 18 or 17 or 19, somewhere between 17, 18, 19. I mean, at that age of manic depressive, I mean, depressed, sure, he's a manic depressive. If we're to take that post, so, what does this say for the mindset of Kohlberger? Well, in an interview with a lawyer, basically in the affidavit itself, a lot from the affidavit as well, but there's a lot of evidence right now that could implicate Kohlberger in this multiple murder. However, with Gauntlet's being the first and being the most brutal, and with the other three murders that follow, how can he explain away the sheet that was left behind? And I'd like to think that in the unfortunate murder of Kelly Gottlieb's, that she put up a fight, and I think she did because there was wounds on her hands, and that she somehow wrestled away. That's how he left it there. There are 50 ways you could fuck up a crime scene, a murder scene, and he made very few mistakes, and four is really something considering it's a stabbing. But he did leave. So what did the lawyer for Kelly Gottlieb think?
Our coverage continues into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. Bryan Kohberger was arrested for the brutal slayings of the students who were found in their off-campus home. Now, Kohlberger faces 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. Our very own Anjanette Levy sat down with attorney Shannon Gray, who is representing the family of victim Kaylee Gonsalves. Let's take a listen as he shares his thoughts on what the Gonsalves family had to say after the 19-page probable cause affidavit was released, as well as the family's feelings on one of the surviving roommates crossing paths with the suspect.
Well, I think it was a lot more information than anybody expected. I've read probable cause affidavits in the past, just through as a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney, and this was pretty extensive. It kind of lays out the prosecution's case. I'm sure there will be additional evidence that they haven't released in the probable cause affidavit, but gives you a good guideline for how they determined that it was the defendant in this case. And so, you have the automobile, you have with the video and the pings off of the telephone records, and the DNA evidence and the witness information, and there's a lot of and the timing of the things that happened. So a lot of information in there to digest. And so, but I thought it was well written, and I thought they did a good job of it. I think they wanted to make sure they had probable cause. So they put plenty of information in there to establish that. So we're just hopeful that, they've said all along that they not only want an arrest, but they want a conviction. So we're hopeful that, you have to really realize that there's probably 3 other crime scenes or areas to gather evidence still available. You still have his apartment, you still have the car, and you also have his parents' house. And who knows what they're going to find in those locations and what evidence they might gather, as well as all the information that might be coming in now that people know who he is, right? So a lot of circumstantial evidence I expect will be coming into the police department about different things about the defendant and any connections that he may have had to any of the victims in the case. We all have to remember that she is a victim in this case. I don't know if anybody everyone's there to second guess what happened. and how she should have or could have reacted. She states I think in the affidavit that she froze in that moment and then went back in her room, and and ultimately the 911 call wasn't made until later, 8 hours later, I believe, or something along those lines. But who knows? I mean, maybe she saw him and maybe she thought he was going out for a smoke out on the deck and coming back in. Who knows what was going through her mind? But I don't think anybody should be putting any blame or anything on her about anything. And the family feels the same way. She's going through a traumatic incident where she had 4 roommates that were murdered. She was able to garner some information that helped out the affidavit, the identification of the black clothes, of the black mask over his nose, the bushy eyebrows, approximate height, approximate build. Very critical to the investigation. I mean, if they bring in a guy that's 6'6" and doesn't match the description, right, then you have a different, but it seems in line with what the defendant looks like in this case to a certain degree. So, and maybe they find dark clothes and they find a dark mask in some of the locations that they've done. So she's really, I think everyone should be praising her for getting an identification and being able to give that solid information there and not look about what she might have or could have done, because we have no idea what mental state she was going through at that time. It's easy to criticize. It's harder to be kind nowadays. So, everybody's got their idea of what could have, should have, or would have done, and just show her some kindness and grace. If I'm pretty sure no one's more critical than she is of herself on things. So I don't think anybody needs to beat her up and anything. And the reality of it is she's providing really great evidence regarding the identification of the defendant in the case. And that's pivotal. I think it is pivotal in a prosecution, having someone that can give an identification of the general, height, build, and what he looks like and things like that.
So, when we talk about the motive for murder for Bryan Kohberger, and right now it's a guessing game, but one topic I think we should talk about is something that has been a rather new revelation, something that's very new to me, but is not foreign to me because I've heard it before. And I always hate using the Post as anything. So anyway, the Post on dated January 15th talked about basically psychoanalyst Bryan Kohberger from the case file. And he basically went on to say, quote, the murders may have been an effort to assert some type of dominance by Kohlberger, in which he went on to say that by continually stabbing his victim, this indicates an uncontrollable and extreme anger. Kohlberger has been described as socially awkward with a long history of interpersonal problems. Well, as you could see by the posts I read to you from Tapatalk, could be the case, and that he surmised that Bryan Kohberger may have developed a sort of incel. You may say, well, what's an incel complex? Well, the term is an abbreviation for involuntary celibate. It's generally used to refer to men who struggle to establish romantic or sexual relationships with women. The identity is occasionally linked to misogynist online forums and in extreme cases of crime. In fact, one case in particular that reminded me of this was Elliot Rodger. Elliot Rodger out of California, I think killed like 4 people, 3 of them girls, and hated and he made a lot of videos. In fact, I downloaded some of those just to analyze myself. Early on, his YouTube channel is now taken down. But in his videos, he basically does talk about his hatred for women who love athletic men or successful men. And even though he himself was, a decent, good-looking young man who was basically, his father, I think, was a producer or a Hollywood director or something, not big time, but just leads me to believe that here's a kid who has a successful background, but is very awkward, socially awkward, or socially inept. And basically, this reminds me of that case a little bit, Turks, and about the mentality of maybe Kohlberger. And though it's not a proper psychological definition, often have poor mental health and experience victims of, they're victimized by their own perceived of inferiority or loneliness and victimhood. And that's actually his personal analysis of Kohlberger echoed that of a very famous forensic psychologist, Dr. Carole Lieberman, who's usually on court TV. Incel profiler. She actually said to court TV. So, all right. I had a theory that Kohlberger did want to be caught because this he knew would be a high-profile case. The victims are young, they're very pretty, they're good-looking, and he committed 4 murders. Because he made a couple of mistakes in these murders, not too many as the average person would, but still mistakes that he made by leaving a person behind who saw him face to face, even though she could give a decent description of him, but he saw her and he still let her live. The sheath cakes that he left behind. He should have been a little bit more careful. And he committed the murders on the top floors. Usually, if you want to commit a murder, in and out, you do it on the bottom floor. In and out, easy accessible, and you don't go upstairs. The first thing he did, he went to the 3rd floor, and he killed 2 people. Then he went to the 2nd floor, killed 2 more, went downstairs, and there was 2 people there. Walked and they didn't live. I don't know why he did that. Anyway, and yes, also, his cell phone. He didn't have it on during these murders, but he turned it on when he got back to his residence. And, this was about 2 hours later. He must have thought at that time that that would look pretty suspicious of having the phone on all day and then, an hour before the murders turns it off. And then 2 hours later after the murders turns it back on. Any investigator with their assault is even a layman basically going to say, well, it's time. Very questioning. So either this was his first time committing murders and he made these mistakes, or my theory is that I think he's killed. And I agree with Bill Warner investigator Bill Warner from Florida. On his website, Bill Warner Investigates, he actually thinks that this guy's killed. And in another state near Oregon, I don't want to say it's Idaho. No, I'm sorry. Washington and Colorado, where they had a similar stabbing in a year prior. People who were stabbed in their sleep. Fits the MMO of this guy. Was it him? I don't know. But did he want to be caught? Well, he left some clues as to how he could be caught very easily, and driving a white car and sneaking out in the months prior, which usually serial killers foul. He. So there's a lot of things, and so I don't know what to say regarding this, but has he had problems with women before? Well, let's listen to a former date of Kohlberger's, who basically summed up Kohlberger like this.
You're going to meet someone who says, I knew him several years ago. We went on a date. And she had a very memorable experience with him. Nothing tragic, but Haley Willette, she's on the screen right now. Haley, thank you very much. I appreciate this. Gutsy move, wanting to come forward and talk about this. You're going to expose yourself to the mob on social media. I suggest you stay off it for a day or so. But thank you for doing this. And let's start with the basic. How sure are you that Bryan Kohberger is the same person that you went on the date with some years ago?
100%.
Because?
He just has a very memorable face, and I'm sure it's him. I remembered as soon as I saw him.
And the name is fairly memorable also, and he was going by Bryan Kohberger then as well?
Yeah.
So tell me, what is the big takeaway for you about what you remember about this young man?
The big takeaway is that he seemed completely normal until, we got back to my dorm, and then he got kind of pushy.
All right, now let's try to feel this out, because you've been on plenty of dates, I'm sure, and it's not unusual for somebody to behave in a way you don't like, but this now matters to you. You say that there was a moment where he was touching you, not in a creepy way, but he was definitely touching you, and you brought it up, and that's when things changed. How so?
Yeah, he was touching me, and I just asked, "Why are you touching me?" And he immediately got very serious, and he said, "I didn't." And I just was like, "Okay, but you are touching me." And he was like, "No, I'm not touching you." And he just got very defensive about it. So I just let it go after that. But it was very weird.
Now, people can get defensive, but everything that you've learned since made you see this through a little bit of a different lens. Explain that to me.
Yeah, exactly. This is a date I definitely told my friends about, just because it was a little weird, and especially his last comment to me. However, I haven't really thought about it until I saw his face again, and it made me look at it like, wow, he really could have hurt me, or anyone, really.
And what did he tell you about himself that you remember?
We just had a lot of small talk. I remember we talked about the fact that we were both psych majors at the time. So I don't really remember any specific conversations or any specific details about them, but it was all very normal.
How shocked are you to see him doing a perp walk now, connected to such a heinous set of murders, at least temporarily, until police make the case?
It scares me because I was very young and dumb, and I didn't think twice about having anyone, know who I was meeting up with, where I was going, what I was doing, and it all could have ended very differently. And that makes me worried for other young women that, they think they're invincible, and don't think twice about, telling someone where they're going or who they're going on a date with.
So as of right now, we have a lot of hypothesizing and a lot of speculation as to what drove Bryan Kohberger to commit these heinous acts of quadruple murder. And, all the experts in the world and my unqualified opinions mean absolutely nothing on the face of this case. What we're hoping for is now, between now and June of 2023, that the prosecution collects enough evidence to where they can actually pressure Kohlberger's defense attorneys to basically make a decision on whether to plead innocent or guilty. Bryan Kohberger is also facing the death penalty for these murders, and rightfully so. With incel murders, basically, and lust killers, they basically will take the death penalty on. Incel murders usually go out in a blaze of glory, just like with the case of Elliot Rodger, who I mentioned before. He actually was killed by police in a shootout. Is that the case with Bryan Kohberger, or is he that much of a narcissist to where he basically doesn't see himself as a suspect or even guilty of these crimes, and basically has enough pride in him to basically say, well, to hell with that. I'll just take life imprisonment, which is what the alternative is going to be. Multiple life sentences consecutively, not concurrently. And what will probably most happen, I think the realistic approach is that he'll take this to trial so he could relive the experiences once again. Again, this is my unbiased, my unqualified opinion based on from my experiences of studying psychology. And so I happen to think that Kohlberger, even though he's up against, enough evidence to basically put the sweat under his brow, I can basically see this guy going right to the trial so he could relive the experiences through this heinous act. Did he want to be caught? Did he want to get away with murder? Or basically, was this his first time and he made some mistakes? Again, all hypothesis and at this point, we don't know for sure. But what I do know is that all the information, all the updates, of course, will be available to you, the viewer, because what I basically would like to have with every video is an informed audience. An informed audience is an educated audience, one without bias and one without prejudice. The truth is all that matters. So if there's any more updates, of course, you'll be the first to know. Have a good night, everybody.